the Montgomery clan, and the prosperity behind the mask of children's souls. Alma's house always seemed as if it didn't belong to any point in history. A silent mass, frozen amidst century-old trees and white-headed winters. Located at the end of a rugged dirt road in the outskirts of Rhinebeck, the three-story federal-style house stood like a forgotten monument, hidden in the shadow of gaunt elm trees and somber red maples. The porch sloped, covered in moss, and its tall, narrow windows seemed to be observing, waiting. The locals used to tell each other that Alma's house retained its old fortune, that while war, plagues, or bankruptcy swept through the world outside, her family line remained peaceful, prosperous, and strange. But no one asked why, and no one dared to get too close after dusk. Since she was a child, Clementine had spent most of her summers in that house. She didn't live there, but was sent back, as a habit her mother never explained, simply stating, "You should spend some time with your grandmother." She grew up amidst creaking stairs, long, drafty hallways, and windows that always seemed to look somewhere else. She knew by heart every pot of heather in the garden, every curved paving stone by the well, every hollow footstep in the dusty library. Grandma Alma tended the garden with a devotion that was almost religious, and it seemed the house itself was grateful for it. It rarely fell into ruin, rotted, or tarnished, despite the passage of time. Yet, of all the doors Clementine had ever opened, from the clove-scented kitchen to the attic filled with old trunks, there was one door she was never allowed to touch. A small bedroom at the far end of the third-floor hallway, where the corridor seemed to stretch longer on stormy days. The heavy oak door was always locked, and every time Clementine hesitantly asked about it, Grandma Alma would purse her lips into a line as thin as thread, then gently shake her head. "We don't speak of that," she would whisper, her voice as low as the morning mist. "Some doors are meant to stay closed." The answer never changed, and so Clementine's curiosity only grew, like ivy clinging to a lamppost. On stormy nights, the kind of dense storm that was a Vermont specialty, the little girl would press her ear against that door, waiting in silence. Once, Clementine swore she heard something. Not the wind, not the branches, but a tiny peal of laughter, as thin as a needle piercing her ear, which then vanished, as if it had never existed. Another time, she tried to peek through the keyhole, but it had been plugged with something. Wood, an old rag, she wasn't sure, only that it did not want to be seen. Later, on a rare occasion, Clementine mentioned the door to her mother, while they were cleaning the house after her grandfather's funeral. Her mother first froze, then abruptly turned away, her face darkening. "You are not to mention those children," she said, her voice as sharp as a knife, slipping between teeth. Then, as if fearing her own slip of the tongue, she immediately changed the subject. That was the first and only time Clementine heard someone say it so clearly. Those children, not the child, not the boy or the girl, but multiple children, multiple people who had been here, who had disappeared. From that moment, the memory of the third-floor door was no longer a childhood secret. It became a thorn lodged in her memory, festering, impossible to remove, and never fully healed. After graduating from college, Clementine moved to the city. The summers passed more quickly, the phone calls home grew less frequent, and the house in Vermont gradually receded in her memory, like a damp dream stuck in some corner of her mind. Life, as it does, has a way of sweeping you along. Contract after contract, layoff after layoff, performance review after performance review. The mysteries of childhood, if they had ever existed, were slowly buried under the dust of adulthood. Until last month, when Grandma Alma passed away at the age of 97. The morning Clementine received the news, she left Boston, driving through the Green Mountains to the north, then turning onto the old dirt road, the one that had once rattled under her grandmother's car tires and now echoed under hers, the sound dry and strangely familiar. The canopies of maple and elm trees still closed in overhead, as they always had. The scent of dampness and tree sap, mixed with the early autumn Sunday Vermont, never changed. The funeral was simple, somber. Alma had outlived most of her friends. The family now consisted of only a few names. Clementine's mother still as rigid and silent as a marble statue. Aunt Catherine, the eccentric woman who lived alone on the edge of town, always late and dressed in solid black, and a few distant relatives whom Clementine couldn't recall the last time she'd met. Grandma Alma had been the center, the uncrowned queen of the Montgomery family, who both protected and controlled, loved and severed. Now that she was gone, the remaining fragments of the clan were like planets that had lost their orbits, drifting away, silently. After the service, they gathered at the old house. The air was strangely quiet. The house without her suddenly seemed smaller, like an empty shell. The floorboards still creaked, but now the creaks sounded more tired, sadder. Clementine wandered through the rooms, the ones that had once held her childhood summers captive. Her fingers traced over the dusty surface of a makeup table, a mahogany bookcase, the edge of a faded silver picture frame. There were photos hanging on the staircase that she no longer recognized. There were eyes in the photos that looked at her as if awaiting a question. Her mother found her in the library, the room with the window facing the garden, where Clementine used to lie and read for hours in the sunlight filtering through the lace curtains. She was standing before a large portrait hanging on the oak wall, Grandma Alma as a young woman. In the painting, she wore a netted hat and a high-collared ash-gray dress, her gaze directed to the side, the corners of her lips slightly upturned, as if she knew all the secrets others dared not ask. In her hand was a single red rose, dazzling like a streak of blood against the somber palette. "She left the house to you," Clementine's mother said, her voice very quiet, as if afraid of hearing herself. She held out a thick, old brown envelope, sealed with dark red wax. Along with this, Clementine took it. The envelope was surprisingly heavy, as if it contained a small stone rather than paper. The wax bore the clear imprint of the ring Grandma Alma always wore, an intricate, cold design of intertwined roses. As a child, Clementine had often wondered why she never took it off, not even when cooking or gardening. Inside the envelope was an old brass key, its shaft twisted and its head carved with ornate patterns, and a letter written in her grandmother's steady, firm handwriting. Alma's handwriting never wavered, not even when she was nearly 100. "My dearest Clementine, if you are reading this, then the time has come. The house is now yours, along with everything it holds. I know, you probably remember the summers here, and the children who came and went, the small faces, the names that did not stay long. They did not disappear, Clementine. No one truly disappears if you know where to look. The door, at the end of the third-floor hallway, is where it begins, and where it ends. It has been locked for a very long time, as it should be, but now it needs to be opened. Inside, you will find the missing pieces, about things that outsiders will never understand, about choices that only those with Montgomery blood can make. Something has kept this family standing through the generations, and that something needs a keeper. Not everyone is strong enough, but I believe you are. Enter with your eyes wide open, and do not be quick to fear." With absolute trust, Alma Clementine read the letter 3 times. Each time, her hand trembled a little more, as if every word was seeping into her very bones. The key in her pocket, heavy and cold, seemed to drain all the warmth around it, like an object that had been stored in a sunless place for decades, and in her heart, she believed that to be true. Her mother stood in the doorway, uncomfortably silent. Her face was a mask of anxiety, though it was hard to tell if it was for the house, the letter, or for Clementine herself. "What does it say?" she asked, her voice low and tight, as if she didn't want anyone else to hear the answer. Clementine hesitated. Then she folded the letter and slipped it into her coat pocket. "Nothing important," she lied, her voice light. "Just some instructions about the house." Her mother nodded, slowly, but couldn't hide the suspicion that lingered in her eyes as she turned away. That night, after everyone had left, when the last footstep had faded into the darkness, the old house settled into its familiar sounds, the creaking of floorboards, the soft groans of the walls, and the wind seeping through the cracks in the roof. Clementine stood at the foot of the stairs, leading to the 3rd floor. The key was still in her pocket, like a bottomless stone. A part of her wanted to throw it away, as an act of respect for her grandmother's near century of silence. But the other part, the part that had once pressed its ear against the wooden door as a child urged her forward, curiosity, Clementine had always been the curious child. The third-floor hallway greeted her with a darkness as thick as old velvet. The only light came from the silver moon, through a small window at the end of the hall, reflecting off the dust motes, suspended like silent, powdered stone. She walked slowly. The floorboards protested under every step. On either side were paintings covered in cloth, forgotten furniture, silent shapes shrouded in white sheets, like funeral shrouds. At the end of the hall, the door. It was still the same, dark oak, a curved brass lock, a handle worn smooth by the years. Clementine paused. Her hand hovered over the knob. Below it, the key in her pocket seemed to grow warm, like a breath. Was she truly ready for a secret buried for over 70 years, one that both her mother and grandmother had avoided, locked away, and hidden with an endless silence? Without giving her heart another beat to doubt, Clementine thrust her hand into her pocket, pulled out the key, and inserted it into the lock. To her surprise, the lock turned easily, without a single squeak or sign of resistance, as if it had been cared for, or opened more often than she thought. The door swung open, in absolute silence. Behind it, the moonlight poured in, gentle as a thin veil, illuminating the room, as if it had been waiting to see the light once more. It took a moment for Clementine's eyes to adjust to the dimness. Then, slowly, everything came into view, like an old photograph developing in a chemical bath. A nursery, not dusty, not in ruins. Everything was preserved, almost perfectly. A small, identical crib was placed along the far wall. The white paint had yellowed, but it wasn't peeling. A wooden rocking chair sat in the corner, a knitted woolen blanket folded neatly on its armrest, so neatly it seemed an adult hand had just placed it there that morning. On the shelves, wooden toys, cloth dolls, tin soldiers, all arranged carefully. Not messy, no sign of a child having played, only waiting. Like objects, frozen in time. The air in the room was not stuffy. There was a faint, gentle scent of lavender, but mixed with it was another vague, damp, and sweet smell. A smell Clementine couldn't name, but her body recognized it before her mind did. And for a fleeting moment, she felt as if she had stepped into a place where time did not flow, but simply waited for someone to return. Clementine stepped deeper into the room. The floorboards under her feet made no sound, as if the room itself did not want to announce her presence to anyone or anything that was still lingering here. Between the two cribs, under a thin, worn rug, was a small crack in the wooden floor. Clementine knelt down. In the silent moonlight, she saw the crack extended like a straight, deliberate, and unnatural gash. She gently pulled the rug aside. Underneath was a circle carved into the floor, the deep grooves drawn with a black, greasy substance, like ink or something that had dried after once being dark and wet. Strange, writhing symbols, like scorched worms, surrounded the circle, a language not meant for humans. At the center of the circle was an indentation in the shape of a child's hand. Clementine recoiled, her mouth dry. She felt an echo, indistinct, but rising from deep beneath the floor, a sound like a muffled sob. The rocking chair in the corner let out a very soft creak. She turned her head, but there was no wind, no one. Just the chair, which had just rocked a tiny bit, as if someone had just stood up from it, seconds before she turned. On the armrest, the knitted woolen blanket was now folded differently than before. Clementine blinked, her heart hammering in her chest like a cornered animal. The chair remained silent, but in her mind, that creak echoed over and over, not like the sound of an object, but like a breath. She backed away instinctively, her fingers slipping from the edge of the strange circle on the floor, her eyes still fixed on the chair. One step, two steps, then her foot caught on the edge of the rug. Her body swayed, and Clementine fell backward, her shoulder hitting something hard, a small bookshelf placed against the wall, near the door. The impact sounded dry and hollow, followed by a soft sound, like paper gliding through the wind. Thump! An old book fell from the shelf, flipping open as it hit the floor. Clementine lay motionless for a few seconds, her heart still racing. When she sat up, her eyes were immediately drawn to that book. No, a notebook, with a dark leather cover, its edges frayed and cracked, the spine hand-stitched with faded red thread. No title, only a circular stain on the cover, a stain as if left by the bottom of a cup, or something wet and heavy that had been placed on it for too long. Clementine reached out, hesitated, then touched it. Cold as metal, buried in the earth. She opened the first page. The text appeared, the ink faded, but still intact. The 12th of October, 1857. Her name is Elsie, 5 years old, hair like flax drying in the sun, eyes as clear as a lake in early autumn. I still remember the moment she stepped down from the carriage, her dress too short for her knees, her tiny boots worn at the soles. She didn't cry when she left the orphanage, only asked me, "Do you grow lavender?" Then she smiled, a smile that made my chest tighten. Elsie was good at singing lullabies. Every evening, I would sit by the window and listen to her song drift down the hallway, as light as the wind on my sleeve. I never thought my heart could soften like this. After so many years, she loved to climb onto the chair in the study, pretending to read like an adult. Whenever she caught my eye, she would quickly flip the book upside down and giggle. The 17th of October, 1858, night of the full moon. No further entry. The next page is blank. The 2nd of October, 1861. Thomas arrived on a day when the fog covered the fields, up to my knees. He was only 7, thin, but his eyes shone like newly minted coins. He was strangely polite, always bowing his head, always saying, "Yes, ma'am." At first, I thought he was too well behaved. But then I realized he was just trying to be the child everyone would want to keep. I let him choose his room, and he chose the small one in the west wing, with a round window overlooking the grapevine. Thomas loved to stack wood into houses, small houses, with chimneys, windows, even a well and a lantern. When I asked who lived in them, he replied, "Grandma Alma, I'm building it so you have a place to live, in your dreams." My heart ached. I started putting extra pastries on the tea tray every afternoon, because Thomas always gave his share to a wooden doll. The 7th of October, 1862, night of the full moon. Entry stops here. An ink blot trails off at the end of the line. The 29th of September, 1865. Clara, 6 years old, her hair as fiery as the flames in a brick kiln. She wasn't afraid of the cold, often running barefoot in the garden while the dew was still on the grass. People said Clara was mischievous, but I saw life in her, the life this house had lacked for so long. Clara liked to write poems, short verses, with no beginning or end, always ending with the word stay or home. Once, I asked her, "Home where, Clara?" She only replied, "Where people don't stop in the middle." I didn't understand then. I still don't now. The 4th of October, 1866. Night of the full moon. The next page has only a single, heavy ink line down the middle. The 6th of October, 1869. Jonah arrived with the autumn rain. He didn't talk much, but always carried an old wooden flute. I don't know where he learned, but Jonah's flute made the sparrows stop flying. Jonah would often sit by the fireplace, watching the flames intently, as if finding a world in them that I couldn't enter. I started reading to him every night, and when I stopped, he would say, "Grandma Alma, never leave the ending hanging." That sentence made my throat tighten. I cleaned the attic room, made his bed with fresh sheets, and fluffed his pillow by hand. Jonah liked small things, the cup with blue flowers, the chair with a scratch shaped like a bird. The 11th of October, 1869, night of the full moon. Clementine didn't know how long she had been sitting there. Her back was pressed against the cold bookshelf, her legs unconsciously drawn up amidst the scattered pages of the diary, like flakes of memory peeling away from time. The air was thick, so silent that the sound of her own heartbeat seemed to come from another body, distant and fractured. The old lavender scent in the room was no longer gentle. It clung to her throat, cloying and sickly sweet, as if something rotten had been perfumed. To hide the decay, she tremblingly turned each page, the paper feeling against her skin like someone's fingernail dragging down her spine. 1857, 1861, 1865, 1869, 1873. Each diary entry began with tender, loving words. Each child painted as a little angel, lovely, intelligent, unique, and then the end, abrupt, unexplained, no period. The 17th of October, night of the full moon. The 7th of October, night of the full moon. The 11th of October, night of the full moon. And then, nothingness. Clementine suddenly realized she was holding her breath. She stared at the disconnected pages where Alma's hand should have continued writing, but didn't, never did. Why? Why did every child cease to exist on paper on the night of the October full moon, as if they had never been? A small sound echoed, a creak, like someone stepping lightly on dry wood. Clementine flinched, spinning around, but there was nothing but darkness, and the cloth-covered furniture, which seemed to billow slightly in the cold draught. The door to the room was still ajar, as if inviting or stalking. The air was now suffocatingly thick. The wind, whistling through the window crack, made a long, mournful sound. A sliver of icy air slid down the back of her neck, making each vertebra feel like it was turning to ice. Inside her chest, her heart began to race, not from curiosity, but from a primal terror. "What did you do to them?" she whispered, but the sound was like someone else's voice, choked, distorted, no longer her own. "Why did you stop writing? Why? Did no one grow up? Why did no one ever come back?" No one answered. Only the silent walls, suspiciously silent, as if they knew everything, had witnessed everything, but were accomplices. A shiver raked her ribs as the faint moonlight illuminated a round indentation on the wooden floor, right in the middle of the room. It was unclear if it was the mark of an altar, or just a place where blood had once dripped and was never completely cleaned. She didn't realize tears were streaming down her face, not from fear, but from something worse. She knew she was about to find the truth. Clementine's head spun, as if the air around her was condensing into a cold fog, wrapping tightly around her skull. The words from Alma's diary still seemed to burn behind her eyes, and nothing could quell the shiver that was creeping through her. Why did all the entries stop on the night of the October full moon? Why, after that night, did she never write another line about those children? She needed answers, and deep in a corner of her mind, Clementine knew if there was any place in this house that still held the secrets of blood and silence, it was the attic. The way up was hidden behind a wooden panel in an old wardrobe, a detail she had glimpsed as a child, then was forced to forget by her mother's stern gaze. Now, with a strange certainty, Clementine's hand found it, as if it had always been waiting in her memory. The panel creaked open, with a soft crack. Behind it were narrow, dark stairs, the smell of rotten wood and the dust of ages hitting her face like the breath of an ancient creature. Every step she took echoed with an unusual creak, as if the floor was unaccustomed to the weight of the living. At the top, the flashlight beam swept across a long, low space, the ceiling sloping with the roof, looking like a cavern of sealed memories. Cobwebs hung down, like the hair of old crones, and dust swirled with every breath. The trunks and wooden boxes were arranged carefully, too carefully, in a way a normal storage space would never be. Each was labeled, with handwriting so neat it was haunting. Nora's belongings, 1857, Harvest Fotos, 1861. Ritual notes, to remain sealed. Clementine ran her hand over each label until she stopped before a small ebony trunk with lettering carved by hand on top. The paint almost completely faded. The chosen one. The small brass lock was cold, and the key she had received from Alma's letter fit with an unnerving perfection. When she turned it gently, a click echoed, and the lid sprang open. A musty smell, reminiscent of lime, ash, and decaying dried flowers, billowed out instantly. Clementine opened the trunk. Inside were not lines filled with love, but cold records, lists, years, names, written with a chilling neatness. 1857, Nora, completed. Vienas tūkstantis aštuoni šimtai šešiasdešimt vienas tomas completed. 1865 Clara, completed. Each line ended with the same symbol, a closed circle, with an eye inside. At the bottom of the trunk was a black, untitled, leather-bound book. Opening it, the first line was written in red ink. I have nurtured, protected, and sacrificed, as the blood of my ancestors dictates, Not because I wanted to, but because the family must survive. She turned the next page, her heart tightening. I don't remember all the children's names, but I remember every last breath. Clementine shuddered. She was no longer just a granddaughter, uncovering a legacy. She was standing amidst the ruins of a flesh and blood ritual, where affection was twisted into a deathly lullaby, where children were raised to be sacrificed, in silence, in loneliness, in a cursed love. The wind howled outside the roof tiles, but Clementine heard another sound, something like fingernails dragging across wood, very faint, not from downstairs, but somewhere in the attic itself. She froze. The flashlight beam stopped mid-air, reflecting a fine layer of dust swirling as if someone had just walked past. She quickly swept the light towards the end of the attic, where the light couldn't reach. Nothing but the familiar scent of lavender, the one that had filled the third-floor room, was now spreading everywhere, this time mixed with the smell of spoiled meat and damp earth from a crypt. In her palm, the black leather book seemed to grow warm, pulsing with the frantic beat in her temples. The last line she had just read still echoed, "I remember every last breath." Clementine's stomach churned. She suddenly felt she was no longer alone. She backed away from the trunk, carefully closing the lid, but the hinge let out an unusually loud creak, too loud in the tomb-like silence. At that moment, the shadow in the corner of the attic flickered once, then twice, as if something had just moved. Clementine swallowed hard. She spun around, shining the light into that dark corner. No one, just a wooden doll, standing upright against the wall. But she was sure it hadn't been standing there before. The doll had no face, just a blank oval space. But now there was something, like a child's bloody handprint, on its chest. Clementine stumbled back towards the stairs, but the floorboards behind her groaned, out of sync with her steps. One beat, then another, as if someone was walking right behind her. But every time she turned, it was just empty space, distorted by the flickering light, and dust suspended like cremated ashes. When she turned completely to climb down the stairs, a thin breath brushed past the nape of her neck. The air grew thick, silent, then a whisper rose, right next to her right ear, a child's voice, but flat and dry, like a decaying shroud. "Grandmother promised we could watch the moon." Clementine screamed and scrambled down the stairs, not remembering how she got down, sliding, falling, or crawling. She only remembered the feeling of the floor below, hitting her knees, and the flashlight crashing to the ground, flickering, and then dying. In the suffocating darkness, she could still hear the sound of small feet running above, a short laugh. Then, silence, but not a true silence, the kind of silence that only exists in places that have known the scent of blood and oaths. Clementine lay motionless at the foot of the stairs, her chest heaving as if it would burst. The house was now suffocatingly quiet, as if it were listening to her breathe. The darkness around her suddenly grew thick, as if stretched taut by an unnameable force. But what scared her most wasn't the childish laughter, not the moving doll, but her own silence. She didn't run, not because she was brave, but because she needed to know. Clementine staggered to her feet, the shattered flashlight at her feet. The only light was the October moon, shining through the large hallway window, round and red as an open eye. That light pulled her to the one place in the house she hadn't yet explored, the family chapel. That room was at the end of the first-floor hallway, next to the library. As a child, she had seen her grandmother lock it tightly with a large brass key. The last time that door had opened was during a candlelit ceremony when she was very young. She didn't remember much, but she remembered the smell of blood. The door was unlocked. Inside, the room was small and narrow, like a chapel. The walls were covered with portraits of ancestors, the gilded frames tarnished, the eyes of the people in the paintings looking down, as if inspecting every breath of the one who entered. In the center of the room was a low altar of black marble, covered with a stained white cloth. Clementine approached, her trembling hand lifting the cloth. Beneath it was an oval mirror with a silver frame as large as an adult's arm. The mirror's surface did not reflect. Instead, it was as black as ink, as if it contained a starless sky. Below the mirror, a piece of parchment was clipped with a red wax seal bearing the Montgomery crest, the covenant of the harvest. The ink was in an ancient, slanted script, written with a trembling hand. In every 5th year, under the October moon, a young soul, belonging to a member of the Montgomery clan, shall be offered to the mirror of still reflection in exchange for prosperity and longevity for the main bloodline. The mirror of still reflection will draw the soul through the first gaze. The child must see itself. It must be lifted up by the hand of the chosen one. Not a drop of blood shall be spilled, not a scream shall be uttered. If this fails, the clan will be devoured from within. Clementine staggered back, hitting the leg of the altar. An image flashed in her mind. Nora, in a blue dress, the moonlight shining in her eyes as she was lifted up. One of Alma's hands held her back, the other guided her gaze into the mirror. No knife, no fire, just a look, and then silence. Forever. The mirror, that was the mirror placed in the 3rd floor room, the room that had been locked for so many years, the one her grandmother and mother had always avoided mentioning. This was the heart of the sacrificial ritual, and the place where the children last saw the moon, through the window. Her mother, though she had never said it, surely knew something. Perhaps she had witnessed the ritual, protested, or even handed a child over to Alma. The morning light held no warmth. It was merely a pale light, not strong enough to banish the chill that still seeped through every plank of wood in the house. Clementine sat motionless by the kitchen window, a cup of cold tea in her hand, but in her mind, the mirror was still hovering, just behind her neck, as if she turned, it would appear. Breathing a cold breath of inhuman memory onto her nape, the door behind her creaked open. Her mother entered. She wore a thick woolen robe, her hands holding a bouquet of purple lilacs she had just cut from the garden. Her eyes had dark circles that no makeup could hide, not from lack of sleep, but from having lost something long ago. "You're up early," she said, placing the bouquet in a porcelain vase on the table. "You must have been tired yesterday." "I went into that room," Clementine said. Her voice was dry, like ash. Her mother froze, just for a moment, but it was long enough for all pretense to shatter. Her hands hung stiff in the air, the bouquet slipped from her fingers and fell onto the table, a few petals dropping to the tiled floor, like silent pieces of flesh. Clementine looked at her mother, her eyes burning like candles in a glass jar. "That mirror, what is it?" Silence, this time longer, heavier, so heavy that the portraits on the walls seemed to hold their breath. "You shouldn't have gone in there," her mother said. "Then why does that room exist? Why did Grandma keep it, exactly as it was, for all these years? And the children in the diary, Nora, Thomas, Jacob, why did she stop writing on the night of the October moon? You know, you've always known what happened to them." Her mother closed her eyes. A single tear slid down her cheek, but it wasn't a tear of weakness. It was a tear from someone who had endured for too long. Her mother closed her eyes again, a long blink that seemed to pull a century with it. Then she sat down in the opposite chair, her back hunched, as if carrying the weight of the entire house on her shoulders. "The covenant is real," she said softly. "It started in Alma's time and even before. Every 5 years, a child is adopted, always an orphan, no papers, no one looking for them. Your grandmother called them substitutes." Clementine felt her stomach turn. "Substitutes?" she repeated, her voice hoarse. "For whom?" Her mother looked up, her eyes seeming to no longer see the present. "For us," she said, as if confessing before some god, "to keep the Montgomery bloodline intact. So our children don't die of consumption, so the fields don't burn, so this house continues to stand. Each time the covenant is fulfilled, the clan lives for another generation." "By killing a child," Clementine whispered. She shot to her feet. The air around her thickened, as if steeped in the sap of a dead tree, and the cold smoke of a fire that never goes out. Her mother bowed her head. No denial, no justification. "I read the diary," Clementine said, her eyes beginning to sting. "Nora, Thomas, Jacob, they all called her Grandma. They all thought they had a family." "They did," her mother said. "For a few years, they really did." "You say that as if it's a good thing," Clementine hissed. "They were people. They were children." A long silence stretched, as if the house itself was listening. "I know," she said, "and that's why I couldn't tell you. Because once you know, you have to choose." Her mother looked directly into her eyes, a gaze that was no longer that of a mother, but of the keeper of an ancient dynasty that had quietly existed on blood and mirrors. "You will have to choose, Clementine," she said, her voice even and low, "because now you are the one chosen to lead this family through the coming years." The space seemed to freeze. "You will have to do as your grandmother did, as I let her do. Take a child one no one knows, no one loves, no one will miss. Bring them into this house. Give them warmth. Let them call you mother, family, kin." A pause. Then, light as a breath. And then, offer them. Clementine took a step back. The kitchen seemed to tilt beneath her feet. "No," she whispered. "Mother, what are you saying?" "If you don't," her mother continued, "everything will fall apart. The house will collapse. The garden will rot. Our blood will bring forth tumors. No more harvests. No more life. The covenant will collect its debt, and it is never merciful." "Have we ever tried to refuse?" Clementine asked, her voice breaking. "Has anyone ever stood up against it?" Her mother was silent. In the dim grey light, filtering through the window, she looked like a stone statue, carved from the fear of countless generations. "Yes," she said. "One person, my sister." She took the mirror and hid it, and just 3 days later, her body was found in the garden, all her bones broken, her eyes wide open. She leaned forward, grabbing Clementine's hand. "Why do you think I never had another child?" she whispered, her eyes welling with tears. "Because I was afraid. If you were the only one left, the covenant would choose you. And now, it has." Ever since confronting the mirror in the third-floor room, Clementine couldn't sleep. Every night, when she closed her eyes, she didn't see dreams. She saw herself. It was her, but not her, dressed in a white, mist-like nightgown, holding the hand of a child with hair as fiery as blood. They walked into the third-floor room, together. She saw the mirror open its eye, a slit, like a giant, bleeding pupil in the ebony frame. Then, the child began to scream, but in the dream, Clementine did nothing. She just stood there, smiling. During the day, the mirror hung quietly in its place, but it no longer reflected a true image. At first, it was small details, a shadow in the wrong position, her eyes in the mirror, looking somewhere else. Then it came to the point where the mirror reflected an empty room, with no one standing before it, even though she was staring right at herself. One morning, while looking in the mirror to wash her face, she saw Alma's hand on her shoulder in the reflection, but when she turned around, emptiness. On the third night, Clementine woke to whispers from the third floor, children's voices, not cheerful, but distorted, choked and twisted. "We miss the moon. Will you come up, Clementine? You're the new grandmother, right?" She felt compelled to walk up the stairs, barefoot, in the ash-cold night. The door to the room was open, but inside there was nothing, except a small pillow that had fallen from a crib, and the mirror was weeping a thick, black liquid from its frame. On the fourth night, Clementine saw herself in a mirror, lifting a child, approaching the mirror, and whispering, "We will be here forever. In here, warm, immortal." She threw up on the floor. Blood. Her eyes were bloodshot, as if all the vessels inside had burst. The mirror wasn't just a place for the ritual. It was a prison, and now it wanted a new warden. On the fifth night, Clementine woke with the taste of iron in her mouth. Blood. She had bitten the inside of her cheek, in her sleep. Or, during what? She sat up and knew she was no longer in her bedroom. Wooden floor, under her feet. Damp wooden walls. The third-floor room, but not as it was. Everything seemed to be decaying, in a dream. The cribs were empty, the toys broken. The mirror didn't reflect, but was a silent black curtain, breathing and pulsing like living skin. "She's here," a voice whispered. A child's, but not innocent. A little girl appeared from a dark corner. Her platinum blonde hair was matted, as if drenched in rain. Her white dress was yellowed and stained. Her eyes were large, but her gaze was ancient. So ancient. "I am Nora," the girl said. "We used to call her grandmother. Now, the mirror wants to call you mother." Clementine backed away. "Why? Why the mirror?" she asked. "What is it?" Nora didn't answer immediately. She turned to the mirror. Its surface bubbled like slime. Hundreds of children's faces rose and then dissolved. "The mirror is a mouth," Nora whispered. "And our blood is the offering. It eats souls, but it needs someone to bind us to it. She was that person. Then your mother. Now you." Clementine screamed. "How do I stop it?" Nora looked at her again. Her eyes were stark white, her mouth curved strangely, both in pain and in hope. "Reflect it," the girl said. 3 of Montgomery blood. At the same time, facing the mirror. It will be sewn shut, and then we will be free. Clementine woke with a start, drenched in sweat, but in her hand it was no dream. A lock of blood, matted, platinum blonde hair. The night wind howled outside. The mirror on the 3rd floor vibrated softly. The night of the full moon, at the end of October, the wind shrieked through the old window frames like the moans of abandoned souls. Clementine stood before the mirror in the 3rd floor room, this time not out of curiosity, but because she was being summoned by a whisper in her head. "Come up, come up, come up. We need a new keeper." The mirror was as dark as spilled ink, reflecting nothing but a figure standing there. It was Clementine, but not now. She was wearing an old-fashioned white silk dress, her eyes made up like in a past century, her arms cradling a baby with fiery red hair. The reflection looked at her and smiled, a smile devoid of emotion, only resignation. Then the reflection lifted its head and looked straight at Clementine through the glass, and then the mirror wept drops of blood. Clementine backed away, but the room no longer had an exit. The door had vanished. The ceiling drifted away like a deep well, and the walls began to stir as if human skin was breathing beneath the wallpaper. "Clementine Montgomery," a female voice rang out, Alma's voice, but it didn't come from anyone's mouth. It echoed from the mirror. "You've seen them, haven't you? The children, you think they're pitiful, but that is the price. Now, it's your turn. The mirror needs someone to guard the door." Clementine clenched her fists. "Number, I won't do it." The mirror trembled, and then everything shattered. She was in Alma's body. Before her was little Nora, in a blue dress, smiling, holding a small doll. The October moonlight flooded the room. Clementine, in her grandmother's body, reached out her hand to the little girl. "Grandma, can we watch the moon from the window tonight?" "Of course, my dear." Her hand trembled. "Not me. I'm not here." Clementine wanted to scream, but Alma's voice came out instead. "Come along, Nora." The little girl took her hand. The 3rd floor room opened up. The mirror was waiting, its mouth agape, like a crack in reality. A pull, a shriek that pierced her brain, a muffled scream. Clementine fell to the wooden floor, back in her own body. She gasped for breath, her eyes were filled with tears, and then she looked back at the mirror. The reflection was still herself, but this time it was turning away. The mirror had tried to swallow her, as its successor, but it had failed, and because of that, it would now be more ruthless. No more whispers. It would attack. After nearly being swallowed by the mirror, Clementine thought she would be left in peace, but she wasn't. The next evening, as she walked past the 3rd floor hallway, a blast of icy wind passed through her, as if someone had walked right through her. She turned, and the world vanished. Clementine found herself standing in the 3rd floor room, but it wasn't the present. Time had rewound. More than 60 years before Alma was born, the floorboards were new, the scent of pine resin and coal ash still in the air. Beeswax candles dripped around a circle of white salt, carefully drawn by a human hand, a hand trembling with hunger and desperation. A man in a coarse, dingy brown robe with a thick beard knelt before the circle. It was Elias Montgomery, the family's founder, his eyes sunken as if he hadn't slept for nights. Inside the circle was a small child with blonde hair, wearing a white linen dress, sitting as still as if hypnotized. "Root of reflection," Elias whispered. "You who lives on the other side of the glass, hear my call." Clementine held her breath. She saw the mirror. Didn't exist yet. There was only a black cloth draped over a wooden frame placed in front of the child. Elias took a knife and cut his own cheek, letting 3 drops of blood fall into the salt. 3 drops of life in exchange for a lifetime of protection. A wind rose from nowhere. The candles went out, one by one. The wooden frame shook. The black cloth stretched taut and then tore, and the mirror appeared, not installed, but as if it grew from beneath the wood. Clementine saw the glass surface for the first time. It reflected no one, only a deep abyss. Elias whispered on, in a language not of this world, a language where the tongue slurred and blood trickled from his nose. Take her. Every 5th year, I will offer one, in exchange for bountiful harvests, plagues kept at bay, an unbroken bloodline. The mirror groaned. The child began to tremble. Her eyes widened, as black as ink. "Don't!" Clementine screamed, but the little girl's soul was pulled out like steam from skin and flew straight into the mirror. The glass surface rippled, like a pond where a stone was thrown. A sob echoed, then silence. Elias collapsed, exhausted, but his eyes shone like a man who had just signed a pact with a demon. Clementine woke with a start, her chest aching, as if she'd been punched. On her bedroom mirror, new words had appeared written in condensation. "You are the last of the bloodline. One of 2 choices. Feed me or defy me, and you and your entire clan will die." That night, Clementine did not sleep. She sat in the old library, candlelight dancing on the discolored walls, surrounded by stacks of books her grandmother had kept. She had read everything, in the trunk labeled "Rituals, Private." There was nothing written about how to end the covenant, only haunting notes on how to continue it. But in an untitled book, bound in goatskin, there was an entry tucked between yellowed pages, "Sowing the Reflection Covenant in Reverse." The title, written by hand, almost faded away. The writer's tone seemed both desperate and dangerous. If the mirror reflects the soul, then only by the reflection of the very bloodline it has consumed can it be broken. The one performing the ritual must force the mirror to reflect the successor of the covenant, the blood descendant, and they themselves must refuse the call. If 3 generations of Montgomery blood reflect in the mirror together, the ritual will be sown in reverse. The souls will escape, and the mirror will shatter. But if one of the 3 betrays the others, their soul will be consumed forever. Clementine swallowed hard. She was one, but the other 2, her mother, and her grandmother, was dead. She thought of the mirror in the 3rd-floor room, the one that was quietly waiting to eat again. The next day, Clementine pretended to be more compliant. Her mother smiled faintly, thinking her daughter had accepted her role as successor. But Clementine was secretly planning. She would find a way to make her mother face the mirror, to make it reflect. And then, she needed one more person, or a false reflection, a visual copy, a trick in the ritual. One night, Clementine looked into the mirror and saw not just herself. In the cold glass, a small figure stood beside her, not a reflection, but another entity. The child had tangled red hair and eyes like glass. "Nora, you want to break the ritual," Nora whispered, her voice echoing in Clementine's head like it was coming from the bottom of a well. "I can help, but I have to step out." The mirror groaned. Clementine didn't know if she was dreaming or awake, but the floor was as cold as a grave. "I need a body. Just for a moment. The reflection needs 3, you, your mother, and me in your body. In return, you must swear when the reverse ritual begins. Let me open the final door. Let all of us escape." Clementine shuddered. She saw, behind Nora, hundreds of children's eyes in the mirror, silent, gaunt, waiting. The mirror was hell. No fire. Just endless time and unheard screams. "If you break your promise," Nora said, her eyes glowing like fire behind glass, "the mirror won't sew itself shut. It will open forever." Clementine agreed, and that night, for the first time, she let Nora's soul enter her. Just for a few seconds, the October full moon hung like a cold eye over the Montgomery mansion. Its light pierced through the dusty glass, dyeing the 3rd floor in a light like diluted blood. Clementine knocked on her mother's door. Her hand was ice cold, not from the weather but from self-loathing. "Mother," she said, her voice trembling slightly, as if with emotion. "I understand now, about everything. I want to perform the first ritual, like Grandma used to." Her mother looked at her, silent for a long moment. Then she nodded, not with joy, but with the look of someone leading a bride into a tomb. "Then let's go," she said. "You are ready." They walked up to the 3rd floor. Every step seemed to scream, under their heels. Clementine had already drawn the ritual circle, with chicken blood, wormwood root, and crushed poison seeds from the back garden. The mirror stood silently in the corner of the room, covered with a white cloth, but Clementine could see it breathing. The ritual begins. Clementine's mother stepped into the ritual circle. "You need 3 people," she said, her voice wary. "Where is the third?" Clementine bit her own finger, letting blood drip onto the floor. She muttered, "We will be 3, if I allow it." As the last word echoed, Clementine's eyes changed color, from pale blue to a burning reddish-brown. Nora was in. The mirror shook violently. Its surface cracked slightly, not like glass, but like skin being stretched too thin. In the mirror, 3 reflections appeared. Clementine, but her eyes were no longer her own. Her mother stunned. Nora in Clementine's body, her reflection as faint as smoke. Her mother backed away, but the ritual circle locked her feet to the floor. "What have you done?" her mother shrieked, panicked, sewing it in reverse. Clementine, or rather, Nora whispered, "Betraying the covenant, opening the door backwards, sending us home." The third-floor room filled with the acrid smell of ash, blood, and burning wormwood. The mirror shook violently, its surface shattering into waves of darkness. Inside, hundreds of children's souls appeared, their eyes stark white, mouths open as if screaming, but without a sound. The mother screamed at the edge of the ritual circle, trying to escape, but her feet were locked to the floor, her fingernails tearing at her own skin. Nora, in Clementine's body, spoke, her voice a chorus, as if echoing from many small throats. "One more thing is needed. To sew the mirror shut, one of Montgomery blood must willingly offer themselves, not for the covenant, but to break it." Clementine regained control of her body, but every joint felt like it was on fire. She collapsed, her eyes looking at herself in the mirror, seeing herself age in seconds, her skin cracking like winter bark. "If you step in there," her mother cried, "it all ends. Our family will no longer be blessed." Clementine gasped for breath. She thought of Nora, Thomas, the children who were loved, only to be sacrificed. "If it's blessed by the blood of children," she muttered, "then it's not a bloodline worth saving." She stepped into the center of the ritual circle. The mirror shrieked, a sound not of this world, like 1,000 broken throats screaming at once. As Clementine placed her hand on the mirror's surface, the floor shook, as if something was writhing beneath the wood, screaming in protest. Dry, cracking sounds came from the walls, like human bones being broken, one by one. The moonlight slid through the window like a knife, shining directly onto the ritual circle. Her mother lunged forward, but the ritual circle flared with fire. "No, stop, Clementine!" She screamed until her throat was raw, the sound echoing throughout the house. Her voice shattered like glass crushed in her hand, not just from fear, but from a pain that tore her soul apart. Clementine did not turn back. Her body dissolved into a silent white light, melting into the mirror's surface, pulling with it the faint ash of the children's souls, trapped for over a century. Her mother collapsed to the floor, her hands beating against the shattered pieces of the mirror, blood pooling between her knuckles. The glass shards cut into her skin, but she didn't bother to wipe them away. There was nothing left to scream for, no one left to hold on to. "No, not you, not you." Her voice turned to a whisper, then a choked sob. No more souls appeared. No more voices came from the mirror. Everything had fallen into nothingness. Epilogue. After the night the mirror was broken, the Montgomery clan collapsed, as quickly as if its roots had been pulled from the earth. The farm was abandoned, the flower gardens withered, the assets were frozen. No one ever saw a member of the family again. No death certificates, no funerals, not a single bone. They just vanished. Clementine's mother, the last one to be seen, also disappeared that same night. She left no letter, no farewell, only an empty room, ash, and a patch of charred floor where the mirror once stood. To this day, their disappearance remains an unsolved mystery. It is rumored that one branch of the bloodline still lives, still wandering somewhere, through old towns, religious libraries, abandoned crypts, searching for a new ritual, another way to call the darkness back. And if you are listening to this story, what are you thinking? Let us know in the comments.